Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome and thank you for joining us on our spooky Halloween special. We're delighted to host this session, which will be our 20-second webinar, an introduction to bat conservation in woodlands, delivered by the Bat Conservation Trust, the leading charity dedicated to protecting bats and habitats in the UK. Our speaker today is Emma Turnbull, who will guide us through the fascinating world of woodland bats, exploring their ecology, the key challenges they face, and practical steps that we as woodland owners can do to help with their supporting their conservation. We're really pleased to have Emma. She's put a lot of work into this webinar, and we've been chatting back and forth now for quite a number of weeks. After her presentation, we will have a little Q&A session as per usual. Welcome to lots of new faces tonight, very exciting, and we hope that you will join us again. As always, this will be uploaded onto our webinar log, if you like, the YouTube, and any questions can also be sent to me at sarah@swog.org.uk, and we can take it from there. So without further ado, Emma, I'm going to pass over to you. The floor is yours.
Brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. Welcome to everyone. As Sarah said, my name's Emma. I'm Emma Turnbull. I'm the Biodiversity Training Officer at the Bat Conservation Trust. I've always been into bats and loved watching them from a young age. After an early career in horticulture, I followed my passion for bats and became a freelance ecologist. And after nearly 10 years of working in commercial ecology, I joined the Bat Conservation Trust. During my career, I've worked with bats in both the built environment and trees and woodlands, working closely with professionals in both sectors. I'm particularly interested in woodland bats, and I run a project near Windsor to establish what bats are present and how they use the landscape. I'm also a registered bat carer and rehabilitate injured bats. So during this webinar, I'll be giving an overview of British bats, how and why they use woodlands, and what we can do to support them. And there'll be lots of other resources you might find useful. Bats are incredibly diverse, and it would be impossible to cover everything we know in an hour or so. So hopefully this webinar will encourage you to find out more about bats. And as Sarah said, we can have questions at the end, and there'll also be the opportunity to leave some feedback. So although typical mammals in other ways, bats are unique amongst mammals in their power of true flight. Some mammals, like flying squirrels, may glide, but a really good quiz question, if it starts what flying mammal, the only answer can be bat. So if you're watching the chase or tipping point and it says what flying mammal, there's only one answer. And the wing of the bat is actually a double layer of skin with a framework of arm and elongated fingers. And the bones are very similar to our own. So they have a thumb and 4 fingers, just with really, really long bones that make up the wing structure. And that's shown quite well in this little video snap of a brown long-eared bat. So you can see the arms there, and then the actual bones form the framework of the wing. So we'll start with a brief look at British bats. In the UK, we have 18 species that live here, and we know that 17 of them breed here. Worldwide, there's about 1,500 species of bat. So 17 is pretty good, but globally, not quite so much. So all our British bats are long-lived. They're all nocturnal, and they give birth to 1 young per year. So we call them pups. A baby bat is a pup, and they only have 1 a year. I think people often think they have more than that, but it's part of what makes them quite vulnerable. They're all insectivorous, so they all eat insects, and they all hibernate during the winter. Many species rely on the same roosts year after year, and they've all experienced massive declines, mainly due to their vulnerability to changes in their environment. And it can have a disastrous effect if they lose even one roost or foraging area. So as we said, all UK bats eat insects. They eat a wide range of insects, but they will feed on other things like spiders. And different species have different preferences and different methods of detecting and catching their prey. So noctules, one of our bigger bats, they're really quite big. They eat large beetles, things like cockchafers and moths. And brown long-eared bats, they specialize in catching moths. And different species have different preferences for food and also different hunting strategies. Flight is very expensive as far as energy goes. So flying uses loads of energy. And that means bats need a huge amount of food. So little pipistrelle bat, one of our smaller bats, you probably see them flying just at dusk time. They can eat as many as 3,000 tiny insects a night. And someone has actually measured that. They've weighed the midges, they've weighed the bats, and they've worked it out, 3,000 midges a night. So quite a few. So bats use echolocation to catch their prey and to navigate around their surroundings. Very simplistically, like this animation, it's a bit like sonar. So they emit a sound and the returning call lets the bat know where the food is, but they also navigate with sound bouncing off different objects. They can map where they are. And they use echolocation because they're flying at night, but they aren't blind. That is a myth. Bats can actually see really well. So if you say you're as blind as a bat, it's wrong. They can see well, but just like us, they can't see in the dark. So they use echolocation. Another reason they fly in the dark is there's less competition for their food, also less predators, and it's actually more energy efficient. Flying through cooler night air uses less energy than flying through hot daytime air. And often long haul flights, if you go on a long haul flight anywhere, it will be at night because the planes actually use less fuel. So we've said different species catch different things. This is a little video of a natterer's bat, and it's going to catch that spider. So the spider sat still, sat in its web, and the bat's, yep, I'll have you, thank you very much. And you can see there, they use their feet and their tail to catch the spider. So we'll have a look at roosts. Being nocturnal means that bats need somewhere to spend the day, and they use roosts. The importance of roosts is really clear, and it's defined as any place used for shelter, even if the bat is not present, and that's really important legally. This is because they tend to return to the roost year after year, and each roost site occupies an important niche in the bat's life cycle. So as a slide here, a roost is any place used by a bat for shelter. They don't make nests. They certainly aren't rodents. They're nothing like rodents. So they don't get anywhere and gather up loads of nesting materials. They don't do that. They hang up or creep into a crack or a crevice. In fact, most bats, they only need about 15 mil as a gap to get into. So only a tiny little gap. Every structure, so buildings and trees with features, can be important as a potential bat roost. And roosts can provide options for saving energy. Everything about a bat is energy. Can it eat enough? to support the need for energy to fly. So they might move to a warmer roost in the summer or a cooler roost, and they can form a cluster with other bats to warm up. So the two pictures here, the top one's are greater horseshoe bats, bottom one brown long-eared bats. They'll get together, the maternity roosts, they'll huddle up close together to keep the pups warm. But they can also roost separately so that their body temperature falls, and they'll do that for hibernation. And they're using different roosts constantly at different times. But generally speaking, they need somewhere warm in summer and cold in winter. So here we're going to have a quick look at the bat year. It's quite a simple sort of generic seasonal cycle for bats. And there are variations depending where you are in the UK. Things can happen a couple of weeks before or after, if you're in the south compared to the north, for example. So in spring, in March and April, bats are becoming more active after winter, and they're coming out and feeding on warmer nights. In fact, they will actually feed all winter if it's warm enough. You might see bats in February if we get a really mild spell. But in April, they're becoming much more active, and they're hungry. They haven't fed well over the winter, so they're keen to get out and feed at every possibility. Once it's May, insect numbers are soaring, and the females are searching for suitable nursery sites. At this time, the females are psychologically prepared and food supply is adequate, so an egg is released and fertilized, and the embryo implants in the uterus. Spring is a time when bats use a considerable number of transitional roosts, many of which are in trees. And we're still learning about that. We still don't know the importance of these kind of transitional roosts before they set up the main maternity roost. Into June, they start having their pups, and the mothers suckle their young. Some young at this time will be almost full size, depending on the species, and others will still be really small. As we said, they only give birth to a single pup, and they'll be suckling their young for about 4 to 5 weeks. And it's a really energy intensive time for the mothers. They need to feed themselves and also to produce milk for the young. So weaning starts to take place around late July and August, and the young are learning to fly at about 3 to 5 weeks old. And young bats learning to fly often get grounded. They're not very good at it. When they first start flying, they've got to get used to their wings, they've got to get used to echolocation, and July, August is peak time if you do bat care like I do, because pups get themselves into all sorts of trouble and often end up on the ground and need help. So in September, mating takes place. So autumn, September time is the ideal time to be thinking about mating if you're a bat. You've had all summer, you've done really well, there's been plenty of food, you're at your peak physical fitness. And you may remember I said earlier that the females fertilize an egg in about May. Well, they actually mate in September, and then I'm not sure if it's unique, but nearly uniquely for bats, for mammals, they store the sperm. So they don't fertilize an egg until the following spring, even though they mate in the autumn. Autumn's also important. They can feed up before they think about hibernation. So into October, there's more mating. They're seeking suitable hibernation sites, and they're entering periods of torpor. So torpor is where they literally almost shut their bodies down. They completely drop their body temperature, their heart rate, their respiration rate, and they go into this state of torpor, which is like a really deep sleep. So during November, December, and January, they're using what little fat they have stored as fuel. They can't store too much fat, they'd be too heavy to fly. So they have small fat reserves, but not much. And then we start again back to March. Oh, and I just flicked on a bit quick there. So why protect bats? Well, we know there have been huge declines in their range and their population. 1/4 of all our UK mammal fauna are bats, which is quite surprising because if you ask the average person to name a British mammal, they might come up with a deer or a rabbit or squirrel. But actually, 1/4 of all our mammals are bats. They do have special vulnerabilities. So, roosting during the day, being asleep and trying to sleep through the day when lots of works are carried out, so tree work, building works, bats are trying to sleep, and it's exactly when we're busiest. They can't move very fast when they're torpid or when their young are present. They're also very susceptible to pesticides and chemicals, and they have particularly close associations with the structures that humans want to change in some way. So like houses. So if you're a bat roosting in a house and the woodworm's getting treated in the loft and they're about to convert the loft, you can see they don't stand much of a chance. And their roost requirements are very specific. But they're also really good indicators of environmental quality. They're the top predators of common nocturnal insects. And they're very sensitive to the pressures that affect a wide range of taxa. So that includes landscape change, agricultural practices, habitat management, and infrastructure developments. So all of these things that impact bats can impact many other things as well. So we're going to touch briefly here on how bats are protected in the UK. And that we haven't got time to go into this into any huge depth, but there are various pieces of legislation that protect bats legally. And all UK bats are included on the Schedule 2 of the Habitats Regulations, and their inclusion on that makes it an offence to deliberately capture, injure, or kill a bat, deliberately disturb a bat in a manner that would impair its ability to survive, reproduce, rear or nurture young, hibernate or migrate, or significantly affect the species' local distribution or abundance. And it's an absolute offence to damage or destroy a roost. You also can't possess, control, transport, sell, exchange any live or dead bats or any part of a bat. So for training, I have dead bats, but I had to have a special license that allows me to keep dead bats. You also can't intentionally or recklessly disturb a bat at a roost or obstruct access to a roost. Now, some of the wordings for this legislation changes slightly depending where you are in the UK. So in Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland, there's slightly different legislation. So that's worth bearing in mind depending where you are in the UK. So we'll go back to our species in Britain. So we've got 18 species, 17 of which are breeding. So how does that work? There's one species that we count as being a UK species, but it's a non-breeding one. And that's the greater mouse-eared bat, which a few individuals are found every year in the southeast of England hibernating. And we know it's the same bats because they've been ringed but we don't know where they are for the rest of the year. We never found a roost. We don't know if they breed in the UK or not. So it just goes to show how little we still know about bats. Most species will use tree roosts at some point. So we're going to have a look now at the woodland bats in particular, and which areas of woodland these bats are likely to utilise. It's also worth noting that on the species list there's two horseshoe bats, the greater and the lesser horseshoe, and along with the grey long-eared bat, they're only found currently in the southwest of England. So you're not likely to come across them anywhere other than the southwest of England and Wales. So our woodland specialists. As I've said, most bats can be found in woodland, but some are real specialists. They depend really strongly on woodland for roosting, some all year round, and they'll breed and hibernate in trees. And we've got 6 woodland specialists. The top left there is the Bechstein's bat. They're one of my personal favourites. And they roost in trees all year round, most frequently in old woodpecker holes. And in general, they prefer really closed canopy and dense native understory. Another one of our rare woodland specialists is the barbastale in the top middle there. And they'll roost in trees year round. And they're usually found in ancient or old growth deciduous woods with substantial understory. And their roosts are often found in cracks in branches and under lifted bark. If you have a dead standing tree with bark lifting off it, barbastales love that. Then we have natterers bats. They'll use woodland for feeding and foraging. They quite often roost in barns for their maternity roosts. Bottom left, there is the noctule, one of our biggest bats, as I said. And they love woodpecker holes. They particularly like a woodpecker hole, and they can be really noisy. They can chitter chatter in a roost, and if there's a roost full of females in the summer, sometimes you can actually hear them, and you might even think it was birds, but it will be noctules squeaking away to each other. And then in late summer, single males will establish mating roosts. They'll find a woodpecker hole and they'll sit actually much like that one in the picture is and sing to attract females to come and mate with them. Brown long-eared bats on the bottom right, they mainly roost in tree holes, but they'll also roost in buildings. They like an open loft space, and they can roost in much more cluttered environments. They specialize in being able to fly in really quite dense woodlands. And then the lesser horseshoe, the middle bottom picture there. Now, interesting, these don't use trees for roosting. They nearly exclusively roost in buildings, but they need woodland for foraging. And it's really important to them to have areas of woodland to forage in. So as well as the specialists, we can also divide the species loosely into interior and edge and open specialists. So interior specialists, interior being the interior of the woodland, they tend to roost and forage in more cluttered and shady woodland areas. And these species have the greatest woodland specialization. And the silhouette of the bat there, the picture, shows that they have relatively short, wide wings, which makes them incredibly maneuverable. They can literally hover. So that includes the brown long-eared bats, the Bechsteins, again, lesser horseshoes, and natterers bats. And they really do like this sort of cluttered, enclosed woodland landscape. And with woodland management, there's a tendency to think we always have to open up woodlands. We have to coppice everything or have clear large rides for species diversity. But these species of bats in particular, they really benefit from having woodland left alone and having darker, more shady areas. Then the edge open specialists. These guys, various bats, they'll feed in woodlands, but they'll also feed elsewhere. And conversely, they will probably prefer more open areas and open rides. So having diversity really is key. So the Daubenton's on the top left there, they're a fast, agile bat, and they love hunting over water. If ever you're near a river or lake after dusk and you see a bat flying literally a foot or so above the water, it's probably a Daubenton's. They specialize in catching insects just above the surface of the water. So the Barbastelle is here as well as an edge open specialist. They like the cluttered woodlands when they first emerge. When they first come out of their roost, they like the shady areas. But then once it's darker, they will go out and they'll travel longer distances. And all these bats will use woodland for navigation as well. So things like the pipistrelles, the noctules and the liselers, they'll all fly in open glades in woodland, but they'll also follow tree lines as a form of navigation. So using echolocation to catch their prey, but also to navigate their surroundings. I think it's hard for us to imagine how bats can see with sound, but that's literally what they're doing. So all of these species can benefit from the creation of glades and the maintenance of rides, and especially water for bats. So if there's a pond or ditches, that can be really beneficial to bats, but also leaving some areas not so well managed. So have we got bats in a wood? Firstly, we probably need to consider which species are likely to be present in the area you are. So you can look at local biological record centres and national biodiversity networks. And the maps here show distribution for different species. So you can see if you're in the north of Scotland, you're not likely to get Bechsteins, but you'll certainly get brown long-eared and common pipistrelles along with other bats. So finding out which species are local to you can be really important and maybe help decide how you manage your woodland. So tree features used by bats. We abbreviate this to PRFs, potential roost features. And different bats like different features, but on the whole, if you've got trees in your woodland with these kind of features, you're more likely than not going to have bats. And these features can include knot holes, woodpecker holes, splits, cracks, flaking bark, and different bats will use different features at different times of the year. Broadleaf trees are more commonly used for roosting by bats, but that's purely because they more commonly have the sort of features that they need. They have stronger limbs and they're longer lived and support a range of potential roost features. However, to a bat, the type of tree isn't important at all. The only thing that's important is whether it can use a feature for a roost. So don't ever discount pine trees or small diameter trees or plantation trees. If they've got some features, a bat may well utilize them. So now, to prove the point, we've got a few little videos, a little montage of videos showing some bat tree roosts. So here's our tree line in the daylight, very dramatically zooming in on a woodpecker hole in the middle there. And this is the same hole using infrared cameras. So we're seeing in the dark here, it's pitch black, and we're using infrared to be able to see the bats. And these are Bechstein's bats. And you can see them all in there. They're coming out one by one, having a little shout, echolocating, thinking about leaving. No, maybe not. Stretching wings. Oh, yes, off you go. And you can see the ones in the background, they're all kind of stretching wings and grooming. Bats are incredibly clean and they need to keep their wings clean and in good condition. So this is a particularly small crack feature. And it just shows how bats will creep through the smallest gap. There you go. And I think it's amazing to think you could walk past that tree all day, every day, and you would have no idea that there's a load of bats in there. That one nearly didn't make it. Another tree. So here there's two main limbs, and it's obviously cracked at some point. So there's probably a bit of more cavity in there than we can judge from the outside. And then this is a really good feature for bats. Always get excited when we see these, a nice horizontal crack in the day, and then now at night time. And the bats start to appear. And that one's just having a good crawl around. Is it going to come out? No, it's going to keep going up. But it just shows there's obviously decay in that limb at each end, and they're using all of that for their roost. There we go. One more going to come out, I think. No, maybe not. No, it's gone back in. And this again, this is using infrared light so that you can see in the dark. And you see the bats flying around. And another quite inconspicuous feature that's actually full of bats. So it just goes to show what can be a potential roost feature. And they're lovely bits of film from Daniel Whitby. And then another little video, and this is of a nocturnal maternity colony emerging from their favoured roost site, a woodpecker hole. So again, it's infrared camera. And you can see them starting to think about coming out. Lots of grooming going on. Thinking about whether they're going to emerge or not. Who's going to be first? Yeah, no one's very keen just yet. Thinking about it. And a bit of a yawn there, that one. Still lots of grooming going on. No one wants to go first, I don't think. There we go, there's one. And then usually once they start emerging, you get quite a constant flurry for a little while. The two higher up aren't interested in going out. They're just grooming and having a bit of wing stretching. But once one goes, they do all start piling out. So the importance of woodlands to bats. This table here highlights just how important woodland is for all of our species, as we said, for foraging and commuting. So even if bats aren't roosting in a woodland, they're certainly using it for other reasons throughout the year. So how can we help bats in our woodland? As we said earlier, we can find out what bats are present in our local area, and we can look around our own woodlands and see what the potential for roost features are. So this slide is a couple of birch trees. They're just behind them is a plantation that was thinned. And you might look at these two birch trees and think, oh, they're pretty rubbish. You know, they're not got a huge amount of value. They're quite insignificant. But the tree on the left, we actually found a brown long-eared bat in. We used an endoscope. You have to be licensed to use an endoscope, but we endoscoped, and there was actually a brown long-eared bat up there where the red circle is. And it's only a small birch that's only about 3.5 foot off the ground. And it must have entered here. That's where the only gap we could get the endoscope in. So it's traveled up into that bit of the tree. But this is to really just show that not all roosts are going to be meters and meters up. Bats like brown long-eared bats will go into trees really low off the ground. So it's really worth managing woodlands to create a diversity of habitats and keep some of these smaller trees that you might think aren't actually that significant. We can also put up bat boxes. Bats will readily use bat boxes. And this is where local bat groups can come in handy. They might have licensed people that can run a bat box scheme or help you decide where to put bat boxes. Again, you'll need a license if you want to open a bat box and have a look in it, like in the picture there. That's a couple of nuptials in a bat box. But it could be well worth finding out your local bat group and getting in touch with them. And the web link there is it's an interactive map now on the Bat Conservation Trust website where you can find your local bat group. And then they might be able to set up a trapping project to research bats further. The picture on the left there is a harp trap that we use for catching bats in. And the two bats there are a Beckstein's on the left and a brown long-eared bat on the right. So two woodland specialists that were found in that woodland that's in the bottom photo. So useful resources. The Bat Conservation Trust, bats.org.uk, loads and loads of information, all sorts of information about bats and woodland, but also training courses that can lead to a better understanding of bats, bat ecology, all sorts of different resources available there. We also have a tree tag scheme where you can get tree tags for identifying bat roosts. And there you can record the species of bat, the species of tree, and what sort of roost it is. A must-have for anyone who's into trees and bats is the Bat Roosts in Trees and the Bat Tree Habitat Key, which was set up by Henry Andrews, and it's based on his extensive work. And it's an amazing resource. It's used for people to record bat roosts, the type of bats, the type of trees they use, and it's well worth having a look at. We also have the Bats and Woodland, a little flip book that has lots of information about bats and woodlands. The table from earlier came from that. A more professional guidance can be found in bat surveys for professional ecologists. There's also the British Standard 8596, which is about surveying for bats in trees and woodland. And that gives guidance on surveying for bats in individual trees. There's also the government website, gov.uk. They have a whole section on managing and protecting woodland wildlife, and that's all wildlife as well as bats. Other useful links that will pop in are, there's a link there about ash dieback and how to manage woodlands that we're concerned with ash dieback about. And also another general woodland wildlife toolkit can be found at silver.org.uk. And I think that brings us to the end.
Thank you very much, Emma. That's a
It was
wealth
a
of
bit of a whistle
information.
stop tour of batness.
No, it's perfect. Absolutely perfect. I never realized there were only two families, even despite there being so many species. I never realized
Mhm,
that. I tell you what, let's get to the questions because we've got obviously quite a lot of people, so quite a lot of questions.
mhm.
Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for your expertise, Emma, but thank you to Mary for being my glamorous assistant, and she's popped in all of the links as you mentioned them
Oh, brilliant. Well done,
seamlessly.
Mary.
So, question-wise then, some
Shall
of them are
I?
answered as we go along. Um, how long? So this is right back at the beginning of your talk.
Yeah,
I think you were talking about the long-eared bats. How long is long-lived regarding bats?
long lived. So pipistrelles, the little tiny bats, they're going to live possibly 10 years.
Okay.
Um, there was, I think it was a natterer's bat in Eastern Europe that had been ringed, and they found it for 41 years. So they ringed it 41 years ago and they still were finding it 41 years later. So and horseshoe bats, the bigger bats, the greater horseshoe, they'll live 30, 35 years in the wild. So for
Wow.
such a small mammal, they really do have a long life.
Yeah. Okay. And I think this question has been answered. Hibernate. So we've discussed that they go into a torpor,
Yeah.
and that's kicking off around about now. Did it say on the grid?
Yes, yeah. So round about now, once the weather starts, it's basically once the insects stop flying, they can't eat, so
The
they can't replenish any energy they use. So
Okay, thank you. Kitty asks the question, if we want to fell a tree and can see there is a hole in the tree that might be being used by a bat, but we don't know for sure, what should they do? What should they do in their woodland?
ideally, this is where you would contact your local bat group or the Bat Conservation Trust helpline, and they'll give you advice on the best way to go around it. It could be, it depends what you're doing. If it's quite a large scale tree felling you're taking on, you might need to employ an ecologist to come and do some survey work to assess trees for suitability for bats. So yeah, best to start with, contact the Bat Conservation Trust and see if they can point you in the right direction.
Okay, Kitty, then all of the links are in this chat here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and then Sarah asks, does it matter what type of substantial understory? I think that must have been in reference to when you were talking.
Yeah, no, I mean, native's always best, but basically it's letting scrubby stuff grow and not having complete clearance right the way through. So the woodlands here, we have a lot of oak, ancient oaks and oak woodlands, but where we get the woodland specialists, the Barbastells and the Becksteins, it tends to be where there's been less clearing. There might be yew, elder, hawthorns and things on the edges that just make it that bit more enclosed in a darker space.
Okay, thank you. Sharon asks, do you get more than one species living in the same area?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So here at Windsor, we've got 12 species, um, which is Berkshire. So quite a long way away in the southwest, in sort of Dorset, Somerset. You're going to get virtually every species we get in the UK, but there are geographical ranges that mean you won't get them in other parts. But yeah, you can definitely get, and you'll get potentially more than one species using the same feature or certainly using the same tree.
Oh,
So that's worth bearing in mind.
okay. Lucy asks, when is the best time of year to see what type of bats they have in their woodlands?
Really, you're looking at sort of May time when they're becoming most active again after the winter. May and autumn would be the key times that you're most likely to see them. And if you get a bat detector that converts the echolocation into a sound we can hear, we didn't really touch on that. We didn't go too deeply into that because of time constraints. But again, on the Bat Conservation website, there's lots of information about bat detectors and things. But you can pick up a reasonably cheap bat detector, go
Okay.
for a walk through your woodlands on a nice late spring morning evening, and yeah, see what you can hear.
Oh, wow. Okay. That sounds really good. Lucy said, are bats likely to use a young wood, about a 25-year-old woodland that's not fully established?
They can do. Again, it will depend on what features are available. So those couple of little birch trees, they're not very big, they're not very old, but they had damage and features that meant bats could utilize them. With younger trees, chances are you're probably not going to have the features that bats could utilize. But then you could always put up bat boxes. And there's quite a lot of research going on about the veteranization of trees. So where you damage a tree to make it have a feature in the future. So that's worth Googling if you're interested. People are literally sort of hitting tree trunks with sledgehammers and things to wound the bark so that in 5-10 years time it's creating cavities and wounds for things to get in, including bats.
Oh. Um, David asks, do bats have particular favorite tree species? You've mentioned a few that they like.
Yeah, again, it's not especially the species, it's more the features that
Yeah, okay.
develop. So beech trees are quite good. They have those kind of, they can get sheer cracks and splits where branches, even if they don't fail completely, they might crack. Um, Oak are really good for if you leave standing deadwood. Oak monoliths are brilliant because their bark peels away in such a way that barbastels in particular utilize them. So yeah, different species that they decay and respond to damage differently. So that's more what the bats are thinking about than the actual species. I think I suppose the key thing is in woodland, more mature, ancient woodland is likely to have more diverse invertebrate populations. So therefore, more bats are going to utilize the areas for foraging.
Okay. Okay. Brian asks, thank you for that answer, Emma. Brian asks, can you please suggest a bat ID app to use on the phone?
There isn't one really. Bats, if you can get bat detectors, you can get an echometer touch, for example, although they're good couple of £100 that you can plug into a phone and use as a bat detector. But it's still really hard to acoustically analyze bats accurately. Some species, the myotis, so the Becksteins, um, those sorts of bats, one, they echolocate quite quietly, but they also echolocate very similarly. So they use the same frequencies. When we're studying bat calls, we look at sonograms as well, the pictures of the bat call and they look the same. It can be really hard to get down to species level just with sound alone. So they haven't made an app yet. With the technology isn't there yet. Probably
Don't
one
worry.
day,
We
but
ask. We know the answer. We always want a fungal
an app.
ID app, and we know there's no such thing because they're all so
Bats are still up
similar.
as well.
But
The
we
good thing with bats is if you get a bat detector, just a relatively cheap one, then you have to use your ears and your eyes and look around rather than looking at a screen. And then you can get quite good at bat ID doing that.
Okay, thank you. Jade asks regarding the roosts that are made in a woodpecker hole, what if the
Mm-hmm.
woodpecker comes back?
They quite often have a fight, actually. There's some video on YouTube, it's probably on YouTube, of a noctule seeing off a squirrel and seeing off woodpeckers. So, yeah, once the noctules decide it's their home, they're quite good at defending it.
Oh, that's good. That's cool.
They're
Uh,
quite big. I mean, they're reasonably big bats, and they've got quite a bite.
right.
The jaw is pretty big, so they can be quite aggressive, but they're also really loud. So if they shout at you, you're going to know it. If you were a squirrel right next to a noctule and he's shouting at you, you're going to go away just because of the noise.
I'm 100% going to look for that on YouTube after this. The holes have to be dry.
No, strangely, they actually quite like humidity. Um, Bats, they lose a lot of moisture from their wing membranes.
Okay.
So they like really humid conditions because it helps keep their wings in good supple shape. So again, it will depend on the time of year, but usually in winter they much prefer a damper, more humid environment. So
Okay. That's surprising. Gordon asks, is there any evidence of bats using ash trees with ash dieback disease decay? And are they suffering due to the loss of roost due to the dieback trees situation?
that's a bit of a how long is a piece of string? Yes,
Right.
because ash trees do have good potential roost features, and any dying tree potentially has good roost features. I guess the thing with ash, some if it's young trees, they're kind of dying off before they've even had the chance to develop roost features. So in that situation, you'd say no, it's not,
Mm.
the end of the world. I know in some places they're kind of lopping off ash trees at heights to leave monoliths that will then develop roost features for bats. So that's one way of not completely sort of clear felling everything in sight, leave monoliths instead.
Right, okay. Steve asks a question. If we don't see many woodpecker holes, would it be helpful to drill some holes in some of our trees?
People are doing this. This is I touched on that just now.
Yep.
Veteranization of trees.
Yeah.
Um, if you're happy to drill holes in your tree, why not give it a go?
Um,
People actually, they'll what you can do is sort of chainsaw off a section of trunk, hollow out behind it, screw it back onto the tree, and leave a little gap at the bottom for the bats to get in. So you can experiment with stuff like that if you've got trees you can sacrifice.
oh,
Our
interesting.
tree surgeon said that if it's standing deadwood, he goes around with a chainsaw and he chainsaws up, notches up into
Yeah,
the tree all the way around all the different directions, if you see what I mean, and at different heights, so that they've got somewhere that they can crawl up into as
yeah,
well, which we're going to try and do.
Oh,
yes, yeah. Also, things like coronet cutting, where you don't just leave a flat, smooth cut if you've had to reduce a limb. Quite often people will coronet cut, so they'll leave it all jaggedy with a chainsaw, so that the rock gets in that bit more quickly and becomes roost features more quickly.
huh. Kitty, if you do that, please can you take photos and send it to me, and then we
Oh
can
yeah,
we
do
can get it
share stuff
online, and
like
then we can share good practice. Thank you, Sarah at swog.org.uk. Oh, I'm relentless with my marketing. Right,
that.
Becca. Rebecca has old trees and a barn. Do owls catch bats or can they live together?
Owls will catch bats.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, do they live together? I don't know. If the barn's good enough, they might risk it.
Mm,
But if the owl's hanging around there all the time, chances are it will put the bats off.
okay. Martin asks, are bat boxes worthwhile in semi-ancient woodland? If so, how high off the ground? Is it too late to put up boxes this year? Will bats roost on fallen trees, say 2 meters above the ground? There's a lot there, a lot of questions.
That was a lot, yes. And most of it's yes. Yeah, why not put up bat boxes? Um, they can go at varying heights up to sort of, well, it's high as your ladder will go, really. Quite often they're put up really high to avoid vandalism. If they're in public places, they can be quite easily vandalized. People throw stones and things. But if it's in a private woodland without any vandalism problems, go for a range of heights, see what works. In more sort of suburbia urban areas, again, you'd put boxes up high to stop cats being able to get to the bats. Cats are very good at catching bats. So have a go, have a play around with different boxes, different types of boxes.
Okay. Speaking of that, but taking the idea further, Melissa says there's a purpose-built bat house the size of a small bungalow on the site of a community woodland project that they look after, mainly newly planted trees with a boundary of established trees. We have only seen one or two common pipistrelles using the bat house. Is there a way to encourage the bats to use it? It was built as mitigation when an old hospital was pulled down.
Not especially if they come across it, they'll use it if it's suitable. I'm guessing there's still someone who's licensed if they can access it to see if it is likely to be used or not. But if it's new woodland around it, it might just be that you need to wait for the trees to get up and then they'll start using it.
Okay. I think we're going to have to just pick a few more questions. Um, okay, Andrew Buchanan is saying that they're running an experiment with bat boxes, put three identical Kent pattern boxes on the same tree at the same level. The plan is to see which boxes or box is used most often, so we know how best to orientate boxes in the future. Results so far are inconclusive. I love the scientific way of approaching that. Andrew, when you find anything, please will you let us know?
Yeah, actually, it's surprising. Some that's actually quite like quite exposed boxes. So you might sort of think, oh, I'll tuck it away in a really shady corner. But they do quite like pipistrelles in particular seem to like tree boxes that are on a tree in sort of full sunlight. And they will move around and use different aspects depending on the weather and the strength of the sun. So they might use a box that gets warmed up in the spring, during the spring, but then in the summer it might get too hot, so they might move round to another side of a tree. So yeah, it's well worth putting up different boxes and seeing who's using what.
Okay, thanks. Katerina asks, so you mentioned that a squirrel is a bad predator for bats. Like are they? And then I suppose you did say that they have a bit of a scrap if they in the same sort of region. But what are,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've mentioned owls. What other predators threaten bats?
um, one of the biggest problems are cats, maybe not so much in a woodland, but if your woodland's sort of on the edge of a housing estate or something, then yes, cats could definitely be a problem. Various birds actually, so sparrowhawks will take bats, especially the early emerging bats like pipistrelles. um, Crows and things will take bats if they know where a roost is.
Right. Okay.
Stoats, weasels, potentially problems. Again, it's something we probably don't know that much about. It's it's one of those things that is understudied.
You're right.
But and competition from different bird species. If you're in the sort of southeastern ringneck parakeets, there's some question over the impact they're having on bat roosts because they're using similar features much earlier than a lot of other birds as well. So yeah, there's still lots of studies to be done.
Magpies, Brian asks, I bet they'd put up a good fight if they interacted with one another.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Right. I think that's all we've got time for question-wise. Emma, I'm
Oh,
astounded at your
I'm
wealth
just
of
gonna
knowledge.
I'm gonna leave the feedbacky bit there for a second, then I'll stop sharing so I can say goodbye.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, please do fill in this feedback form. But if you didn't catch it then, it's going to be in our newsletter, which regulars of you know will be on the first of every month. So it'll be out in just 2 days anyway. Emma, thank you so, so much. I hope this is the first of many times that you will do a talk for us. That was absolutely fantastic. And might I say that we were trying to be 63 and we got 120
Oh wow.
attendees. You nearly smashed the target. So that is
Hooray.
one to beat. The new crown goes to you, Emma. Um,
Brilliant.
thank you
Well,
for
yeah,
doing.
I mean, if you want to forward on any questions or, that's fine.
I just know I'm going to get many questions, so
Yeah, well, and
I'll go
also
away.
I really do encourage everyone look at the Bat Conservation Trust website because that will answer a lot and also point you in a direction for courses and stuff that
Okay. I
really
think we're going to be
interesting.
making mention. We'll be linking to that in the newsletter as well. But
Yeah,
yeah, please
perfect.
do look at the website.
Yeah.
Everybody else, thank you to the new faces that showed up. Thank you very much. It's really great to see us expanding as a community. Thank you to the old faces who always show up. That's always really good too. Any of you have felt inspired that you would like to do a talk? Please do. Like some of us have been first time webinar hosts and some of us are old seasoned pros, but we've got space for everybody. So if you've got a specialist subject that you would like to share, then please email me or go on the SWOG socials and contact us there. Emma,
Brilliant.
please go and enjoy your dinner and
Thank
everybody,
you.
bon appetit and I'll see you all soon. Have a happy Halloween. That's for the whole year though, not just Halloween.
Yeah, that's for life, not just Halloween.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.